Darkness Hi, good morning. Happy New Year and welcome to the first episode of Catholics at Home podcast for 2021. I am Mag and I hope you had a blessed Christmas and kicked off 2021 on a very good note. Now that video of those precious little children, well, they are from the children's choir from SIC Saint Ignatius Church in PJ, and the whole song is actually an original composition, and it's about how the children felt about Christmas 2020. Now, as always, thank you for joining us on the show. Don't forget to like, share, and always be part of the discussion as well by typing in your comments or opinions in the comments section below. But for 2021, I have a new requirement, okay, when it comes to your comments, okay? And it's actually really simple and it goes across the board as well. It's actually just to be kind, right? With so much that's happening around us this day, with the pandemic, with everything happening all around the world, I think the simplest way we can do something for someone is to simply be kind. And for us here is to be kind with your comments as well. Now, 2020 saw most of our year having us sit at home under the several stages of the movement control order. It could have been the MCO, it could have been the EMCO, the CMCO, the RMCO, whichever it could have been. It was caused by a pandemic, the COVID-19. And while the economy took a really bad hit during this time, the people itself, right, we all suffered the impact of the movement control order as well. Now, I know that we speak very openly about how it has affected us as adults, but there were consequences on the lockdowns or of the lockdowns on children as well, and we hardly ever spoke about the impact of the lockdowns on our children. And that's why, to kick off 2021 bright and nice, we're going to be talking about our children. We want to shine a light on the impact of the lockdown on our children. And joining us today is Dato Dr Amar-Singh HSS. He is a senior consultant pediatrician with over 35 years of experience. He spent most of his years as a child advocate and has won awards for the work that he's done. Now, he also serves as the advisor for the National Early Childhood Intervention Council and the National Family Support Group for Children and People with Special Needs. Yeah. So before we start discussing the topic of today or for today, let me bring on my co-host, the one and only Father Clarence Devadas. Good morning, Father. How are you today? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Meg. Did you have a good holiday? Did you have a break?
Yes, I did. Much deserved one.
With family?
What about you?
Your immediate family? Yeah, that's nice.
Holidays are never complete without the families. That's for me at
True.
least. So that's why during the whole movement control order, I was miserable because having to stay away from my parents, whoa, that's so painful. But how was your holidays, Father?
Oh, it was different. Christmas was very different this year. For everyone, not just for us as priests. I mean, on a time when you would have the 2-3 Christmas Eve masses, and then Christmas Day, and then before you recover, that is New Year's Eve and then New Year's Day. But this year was rather quiet. Quiet in many ways, I guess. Not that we have nothing to do, but it also kind of makes you take a step back and relook at things in a broader perspective. Sometimes when you are in the hive of things, when you're doing things, and I always say this, whenever I celebrate during Holy Week, when it's back to back, it's Holy Thursday, Good Friday, the significance of those moments, for me at least, it doesn't hit until after the event because you're just so occupied doing different things.
Correct. I think this you're so immersed in everything, isn't it?
Yeah, you're making sure that the water is ready, the candle is ready, and this is ready. It's the same for Christmas, trying to organize people because you have crowds of people coming in. Yeah. But this year it's about taking a step back and looking at things, looking at Christmas in a different way. So I think that was good. And like you, I got to spend a bit more time with my family. Usually Christmas Day is like, it's crazy all over. By the time I get home in the evening, it's like, I just want to go to bed already. I don't want to talk to anyone. So this year Christmas was better in the sense that, a little bit of time, the family, dinner.
That's nice.
More engaging, yeah.
That's nice. I think for your family, they would have been very appreciative of that too. It's like, finally, he's got time to have dinner with us.
Yeah, even if I'm having dinner, it's like I'm spaced out, because like, I'm so tired, physically tired.
You're physically there, but mentally, you're not
Yeah,
really there.
yeah, just stuffing food into your mouth and okay, let me go home. I want to go to bed. I want to go to bed.
I
So it
totally
was,
understand.
yeah. So it was nice. It was nice to just be with the immediate family.
That's nice. That's nice. Now, Father, we're going to be talking about children this morning. So, before we even bring on our guests, I'm just curious. When you came out with this topic, what did you want to bring across to our viewers?
I think one of the things that, as you said earlier, Meg, I think rightfully, as adults, we are able to articulate, to help to whoever, to a friend, to your spouse, to anyone. You are able to articulate the struggles. Well, some can, some can't. But I always wondered with children, and because I just think of my own childhood. Much of the fond memories is about interacting with other children, playing in the field and in rain or sun, going to school in some ways, not the studying part, but at least the playing part of it was quite exciting. So, but with this lockdown, with all this curtailed, they having to stay at home. And I'm just thinking in terms of not just, when you live in the city today, a lot of people live in closed environments. I mean, you live in an apartment. And that has, I guess that has an effect on children when they can't go out. I mean, it's just, I personally, as an adult, I don't see myself living in an apartment like, just around four walls and not being able to see anything out there. So it must have something to, an impact on children. So I thought maybe let's have this conversation and not just have the conversation, but what can we do about it, to help children? And I think that's the whole idea behind this. What can we do? And not just call it out, but we know it. Let's do something about it.
Absolutely. All right, brilliant. So I think it's about time we brought on our guest this morning. Let's have Dato Dr Amar-Singh HSS as our guest of honor on the show as we discuss the impact of the lockdown on our children. Welcome to the show, Doctor. How are you today?
I'm fine. Hi, Meg and Father Clarence. And as I
Hi,
said earlier,
morning.
Meg, morning. Just call me Amar. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Brilliant. Now, Amar, you've worked with children for 35 years. Before we even step into, the whole topic, how has it been? What do you love the most about working with children?
I think children are great educators for adults. I think as adults, I consider us damaged individuals. We've lost a lot of the innocence and the beauty and simplicity of childhood. We've got trapped in many ways, and children have been my second university in a sense, allowing me to relearn. I've been impressed with their courage, especially when they've had serious chronic illnesses or been disabled, and I've been, on the whole, challenged by them to relook at how I live, to come back to a more simple, more meaningful place in life. They also speak the truth quite quickly. We tend to camouflage the truth quite a bit. Another nice word for lie, but we tend to couch our words where children speak what's on their mind quite a bit. So I've enjoyed children very much. I enjoy also their unconditional love that they express to many of us.
Wow.
I've always looked at pediatricians like a little bit of a magician, because as adults you can articulate what's happening to you. You can tell there's a pain here. With children, it's amazing that you are able to to be able to diagnose, to be able to treat when they're not able to. So you're a bit of a magician to know these things.
That's partly true, Father Clarence, but also with children, what you see is what you get. Whereas with adults, quite often it's a secondary gain. I've got ache and a pain here, when actually they don't really tell you what's their real problem.
They just want an MC.
That's right.
We're all guilty of it.
Yeah, children, the moment they bounce back, they bounce back. They don't want to carry on. There's no secondary gain generally with them. So, there is some difficulty with the very young ones trying to figure out what's wrong. But I like the fact that they're very quick to respond to care and recover, and so that's a lot of fun to work with them. Of course, there's pain as well in children who we can't rescue or who are chronically ill. Yes.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. You must love it so much because, doing it for 35 years and, advocating for children, that shows your passion and your love for what you do. So thank you for doing that for all our children here. Now, this morning, we want to talk about the impact on the lockdown. So we've all had our share of dealing with stresses during the lockdown. It could either be a mental issue or our well-being financially, but what about children? How has the lockdown impacted our children? I think as parents, we don't normally think about that part of things, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll maybe talk about this in two parts. Maybe the first part talk more the organic impact, and the second part talk more about the emotional impact on children. And I think one of the problems we face, all of us face, is that, I've been saying for many months, this is a marathon we're running, not a 100-meter sprint. But the problem with this marathon is that it doesn't seem to have an end.
Yep.
We can't see an immediate finish. I don't know if anybody in the audience has run a marathon, but I ran one when I was young, a 28-mile marathon.
Wow.
And it was very tough. The last couple of miles were phenomenally difficult, but we knew there was an end, so we could manage that marathon. So I think this has taken a toll on all of society and all of adults. So adults have become less hopeful, insecure about the future. Many people have lost jobs. We become, hopelessness in a sense. And children listen to us and they've taken on board some of these things. But if I talk about the concrete impacts, I think the impacts are very different to different segments of society. All of society has been impacted, but some segments of society have been impacted more severely. If I take the one that worries me the most, the poor, and when I mean the poor, I mean, those who are in poverty or push into poverty. The Merdeka Center suggests that 5 to 8% of the public is now been pushed into poverty in this last 1 year. There's also the issue of migrant workers who are poor, and the issue of people in Sabah and indigenous individuals in our country who are poor. So if we take this whole bunch of poor, we're looking at collectively about 40% of our children living in these families. That's about 4 million children, 3.5 to 4 million children living in this poverty. And these people are looking at food security. I think many of those in the audience today won't be struggling so much with food security, but these people are looking at food security. I like the recent UNICEF study looking at inner city problems, that was done, I think, in September, October. And about 40% of people are struggling to know when their next meal is going to come. And I think so. This is one impact. The impact on the poor, they've lost their jobs, they've lost the support that they normally get from community. And so we're going to increase malnutrition in this group of children. At present, our malnutrition rates are about 8% in school. I'm sure they're going to go up. So that's one group that worries me, and I would like to bring more support to them. The second one, I think all of us have been impacted, is education. In a sense, children have gone on an education pause button, I call it. We've lost school for many months, and the effect of that is many children not so interested in school anymore, not interested in education anymore. Again, from the UNICEF study, 1 in 5 children don't want to go back to school, which is worrisome to us long term. Some people say it's okay, you can do digital, but a large, almost I think 800,000 sample size study by MOE, Minister of Education in May, showed that about 40% of children don't have a digital device.
Yep.
And so there's a segment of population who can't manage. Only 15% have their own personal computer, and the majority the rest use their handphone, quite often probably their parents' handphone. So we may say study at home, but it doesn't work out for a sizable proportion of our population. So this freeze of children, leaving them at home and not in school, as Father Clarence talked very rightly about, loss of friendships, there's regression in ability, there's a loss of interest in school, and we're going to have a major struggle to get them back, and you have to relearn. It's not as though you can just pick up for where you stopped off. You probably have to maybe redo some parts of your education. And then there are many others. I worry of those children who are trapped at home. Child abuse is fairly common. I would say at least 10-15% of the entire population suffers sexual or physical abuse. And numbers have reduced this year because children are not able to report them. They're stuck at home, where much of the abuse happens is intrafamilial, most of the abuse. So they can't go to school, they can't tell their friends, they can't tell their teachers. And so these children have no outlet. Some of us, we've got 4 walls to struggle with, like Father Clarence said, but at least it's not a bad 4 walls that we're in. but these children are children who have no respite from the abuse they are in. I could go on and maybe say two more areas that perhaps I'll talk about. One is this collateral morbidity. Uh, I generally don't like this word collateral, but it's a useful word here. While we have very few children who die from COVID-19, and I thank God that it's mild in children, but when we look at what's happening to the rest of children with illnesses, many of them actually have difficulty now getting the care they had in the past. Our health services are swamped looking after COVID. Hospitals have become at-risk places. So people come later. Children get, a downgrade in their quality of their care. So a lot of children with chronic illnesses are going to get, not the same quality of care that they used to get perhaps even a year ago. And finally, one that I am concerned about, we've started dropping the number of children that we give birth to. A lot of individuals have decided not to get married or not to have a child, which is perhaps a good decision at this time. But we've noticed that we already have a 6% drop in our total births. And I think in 2021, we're going to see a sizable drop on this. So there's going to be a generational gap. We're going to see a major drop, perhaps even 10, 15, some people estimate 25% drop in births overall. And this is going to impact us long terms in terms of the services we provide, the education facilities, employment needs. So that is going to be something that we're going to face 20, 30 years down the road. So those are some of the major impacts. But could I say to Mark and Father Clarence, I've shared two documents. Maybe this is a time to share with the audience. One document that I wrote recently is on all the impacts, not just the ones I mentioned, but others. And the second document talking about what we can do about it in terms of resilience of the family. And if Mark could share the links right now, people could download that and look at them at their leisure. Thank you.
I think those documents will also be shared on our Facebook page. So for parents watching, you can actually go and check it out later as well if we're not able to project it right now. In the meantime, if you are watching and you've joined us from wherever you may be, if you have a question for Dr. Amar this morning regarding children and how to help your children during this whole lockdown, please, feel free to comment in the comment section below, and we'll get right to that. Yeah. In the meantime, Amar, I guess the impact of the lockdown is grave indeed on our children, isn't it? I mean, most of the time we only look at the fact that we don't have time for them, but there's so many different angles that we didn't even realize that was there, and I think especially when it comes to children who are raised in a very abusive family, that's going to be, wow, I can't even imagine. So yeah, it's something for us to all consider. Now, for a lot of parents, trying to figure out things between work and house, I think, we're all guilty about overlooking our children and how this is affecting them. And I think even when it comes to education, we just leave them, okay, you do your online classes or you do your lessons and I'll work, kind of thing. We don't even think about how much they're losing out on the fact that they've not been in school for about 8 months. So how can we notice, or what are the signs and symptoms that we can look out for in our children?
Yeah, maybe I'll take a step back and say that, we've been never before, I think, with such an opportunity where we've all been thrown together for so long.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's a wonderful opportunity where we could get to know each other, as we talked about earlier about, I think, Clarence getting to know his family again, and you, Mac, enjoying how rich it is to get home and meet up with family. So we have the opportunity. But sadly, quite often, this closeness that we have creates friction, and the distress that parents are experiencing because of their struggles with COVID, partly their emotional struggles, but also their financial struggles that many parents are going through. So children tend to listen to us. I notice that children have a cleaner, a better listening spirit than we do. They hear more clearly. Adults, I think, always have got damaged spirits, and we rationalize with the mind rather than listen with the spirit. So children take on board our fears. We may say everything is fine, don't worry, but our heart is saying something else. We should listen to our heart rather than to our words. So I think the impact is different for different ages. Let me take perhaps the youngest, the under fives. And in this age group, I think most children who are distressed right now will act out. They might have a bit more temper tantrums, they'll be more clingy, they want more attention from their parents, they're more fussy. That's the kind of things. And parents may say, get irritated with them, but not recognize that these are signs that their children are sensing the disease in society and in the family and showing it by their own behavior. Of course, there could be sleep problems and feeding problems because children are not happy. And for some children, perhaps the slightly older ones, they might even bed wet when they have previously been dry before. When you go to the ones who are in the school, primary school or secondary school, then you probably see more articulation of it. They might be more expressive in their anger and say things to their parents that the parents might hurt their parents. They, of course, may have more mood swings. Whereas the younger ones show it by their fussiness, the older ones might actually show it with actually anger or maybe depression or maybe isolation at times. And I think the important thing to look at any behavior change, especially a change in their relational behavior with you, if they isolate themselves or don't want to mix with the family, that's not a good sign. Again, sleep problems are there, and eating problems been recognized all over the world. Either not eating enough or eating too much, both are a problem. And lastly, for this group, perhaps disinterest in school, a loss of that. All this is not just because of being cloistered with the family, but the whole loss of friendship in school that we talked about. For adolescents, I think there's additional elements besides the one for school going. And I believe of adolescents, we also should think about any suicide ideation that's going on in them, any substance abuse that might happen, and anything that might suggest what in medical terms we call psychosomatic symptoms, which means your body expresses symptoms of your disease, like you may have always be suffering headaches or tummy aches and stuff like that. Because in this group, I think they experience the insecurity almost as severely as the parents would. A lot of the adolescents that I've talked to have expressed fears about the future. The loss of the future is something that impacts them greatly. So basically, all that I described about these three groups of children are two features. One, which is the features of stress, and the second one, the features of depression. And so that's the features that we should look for in our children.
Wow.
I kind of wonder. Sorry, yeah. As you were speaking, Amar, I mean,
Yes.
We're talking about everything going online. I mean, I'm looking at it from a perspective of an adult. I spend a lot of time now, looking into a screen like this morning. I mean, I find at the end of the day, like I'm kind of spaced out because of just this kind of online engagement. And I'm sure, like children, okay, those who are able to, at least in urban areas who have got stable connections, I mean, they can do online classes and
Sure.
and also realize that when parents are working from home, the best babysitter would seem to be to put them something online, to give them a gadget or so you see a sudden kind of the amount of time being spent online with children has kind of got tremendous. I mean, not just school, but because you cannot engage with other children, you end up playing games on the computer, or to keep you quiet, I guess you just give them, please just go ahead and play whatever. How does that impact, the social skills of children in the long term, in terms of, I mean, I was talking to Meg, one of the exciting things is going out to play with other children, and now it's so different. How do you see that? I mean, in terms of the impact on children?
Father Clarence, I had a similar childhood from you. I grew up in a ruralish community. Television only entered my life at about 6 or 7. I remember. Even then, it was black and white Lucille Ball, and we didn't watch it very much. But you play football in the rain, and you fly kites with your friends. That kind of things were my childhood, and I think they were very formative for creating relationships and friendships. I've done quite a few studies pre-COVID on screen time in children, and I am very concerned about this. One study I did on 2-year-olds, where we asked for 24-hour recall from parents about their children's screen time, and it was 8 hours. So 2-year-old in Malaysia that was a 4 years old study, spent 8 hours a day on a screen, quite often unsupervised with internet access.
Wow.
So that's an 8-year-old 3-4 years ago. Today, fast forward, I think almost everybody is on the screen 24/7 except when they sleep, kind of thing. And even then, their sleep is disrupted because we don't have a proper routine nowadays when we're at home. So I think the screen is one of the worst babysitters you can even consider. I think it's a negative babysitter. I won't even consider it an adequate babysitter. If your screen is talking to your grandma, that's different. I think that kind of FaceTime or chit chat is a useful babysitter. And I recommend to some parents, maybe, okay, grandma and grandpa can't be with you, but they could take turns to have a chat with the children and find out what's happening and discuss something and maybe read a book to them. And that sort of thing can be done if you are, struggling at home with your work and not be with their children. But generally, I recommended no screens. Except for the bare essentials, which is very difficult for parents. So screens generally negative impact on children. We want to bring them into their lives later, not early, definitely not in the first 5 years of life. And this is something that we have not grown as a community. And unfortunately, COVID has exacerbated this. Yeah. A lot of screen addiction that I work with children in my practice. Struggling adolescents who struggle not being able to put the phone or their PC off or down here. And that applies to us as well as adults, isn't it?
Yeah, we're so guilty of that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have screen-free days. I have 2 screen-free days in the week. Been
Which
there
is
for
on
a long
the
time.
weekend, is it?
It used to be weekend when I was working, but now that I've retired, it's weekdays. So, from the time I wake up about 4+ until about lunch, you just ignore your screen. The best thing is to turn off your broadband so no messages can reach you. Just turn off your internet access. You leave your phone on for emergency phone calls and then just live. And I usually I'm in nature. I enjoy birds and nature very much. I'm a bird watcher. So I just end up in the forest or go for a walk. And I find that so refreshing. Come back and then just pick up all the messages. There's no worry. And half of them are not worth anything as it is.
That's a perfect way to distress, I think. But I think, living in Ipoh, that's really possible. Okay, so we have a question that's actually on our comment section coming from Timothy Chan. He says, Dear Dr. Amar, may I ask the following questions? How do we help children, especially those above 10 years old, to open up and articulate their feelings? And what are the impacts of prolonged exposure to digital devices? I think we're all very worried about the long-term effects, when it comes to our children, because like you said, most of us kind of tend to use the screens as a babysitter. Not the best, but some parents really don't have a choice. So I've been there before. So
maybe I'll take a step back and suggest what our guidelines are these days so that younger parents can start on this rather than, we try to fix problems later. But our guidelines are under 2, there are no screens in their life at all. They never see a TV, they never use a handphone, except maybe to chat with grandma. Between 2 and 5, 1 hour is the max that they use screen. And that's with parents sitting beside them, parental supervision. And you do something that's educational and fun, maybe Sesame Street or something like that. From 5 to about 12, we give them more access, maybe 2-3 hours a day. And we give them some guidelines, help them understand how to use the online thing. And then after 12, we give them a lot of freedom. We want them to police their own screen and use their screen wisely and know how to handle social media and online predators and stuff like that. So those are kind of like the stepwise guidance we give the children, which means that parents actually don't use their screens a lot around their children either if you go to have younger children. Now, coming back to the long-term effects, I think I've got lots of data on that. And I think the long-term effects are largely effects on sleep, because a lot of people use the screens until late. Effects on eating. A lot of people have problems, either overweight or underweight, both happen. Effects on insecurity. A lot of bullying goes on online and a lot of negativity goes on online, and children very susceptible to this. There's also impact on your long-term education. But I think the biggest impact is on your emotional state. And a lot of people spend enormous time on online, are not as emotionally secure as people who don't. Now, I'd like to come back to the second question. Is it possible to flash that question again, please, Mark? Yes, okay. Yeah, how to help children above 10 open up, articulate their feelings? Yeah, that's a really wonderful question, Timothy, and that's actually maybe a couple of hours chit-chat. I wish we could have a cup of coffee or tea and talk about that. Adolescents are a very different kind of category from younger children. Younger children tend to be a bit more spontaneous. First of all, I must say that children are very diverse with different personalities. So what I say may not apply to every child. We need to know our children very well. That's important. The gift that I think we should give these children who are adolescents is attentive listening. And that's not an easy gift to give. I listen and watch parents quite a bit. I'm a watcher of society and human behavior. And I watch parents say, okay, sudah makan ka? Okay, pergi buat homework, or going to have your shower. So a lot of parental conversation with children is instructions, I've noticed. Or there's something called quality time, which means they spend a small time or very focused time with the children. I don't believe in either of these. I believe we need quantity time, a lot of lepak. I like to rescue this word lepak, a lot of lepak time with the children where we just hang out with them. And so if you want your adolescent, your 10-year-old and your 15-year-old, your 12-year-old to speak to you, to share their heart, then you got to be listener. You got to spend time with them. You got to keep your mouth closed, and then you give them attentive listening. Attentive listening means that we don't listen with tinted glasses. We don't have a sort of a prejudged opinion. We don't respond too quickly, even if they say something that worries us. We spend time listening without judgment, listening without an answer is the right way to say it. And not enough of this given to children. This is a phenomenal gift that you can give to children. And of course, when you listen, don't just listen to their words, listen to their body language, but most important, listen to what they're not saying, which is their heart and their spirit. So I would say that the most powerful thing that we can do is to listen to our children. As a pediatrician,
Wow.
of course, that's my main job. I spend a lot of time listening to children. And it takes a lot of time. The longest I've remained silent with a child while waiting for them to speak is 45 minutes. Neither
Wow.
of us spoke for 45 minutes. This was at
Wow.
home with my wife. My wife and I do a lot of home spiritual direction and support and counseling for people. And people send their adolescents to us, and adults, of course, turn up as well. And you just wait. You just wait. And it takes a lot of courage and strength, just to wait instead of saying, hey, speak lah. What's on your mind now? Tell me what's happening lah. That's the kind of things that guarantee to stop somebody from telling you anything meaningful. Yeah. As all of us
I
very
think
well know.
as parents these days in this modern world, I think we're all very guilty of that, isn't it? We give you quality time. So, okay, this is 2 hours of my time. So now you can talk to me about whatever you want to talk about, whereas the rest of the time we actually do not listen to them properly. They might be talking, but we're not really digesting it. But, that's from my experience. I think I'm very guilty of that. So,
And Mag, is one other thing. We tend to respond negatively very quickly when they
correct.
say something, or like maybe 11-year-old say, "I like this girl very much. I've been thinking about her." And then you say, "You're too young. You should consider your studies. What are you talking about?" And then suddenly the whole conversation is dead. And we have no opportunity to listen to their first infatuation with someone and explore that and say, instead of saying, "Hey, tell me more about her," or would you like to invite her over for a cup of coffee or tea, and let's get to know her a bit better. So we don't respond like that. So for me, I've always done that. I've always asked children to tell me more, even though sometimes the thing they tell me is frightening. It makes my hair stand. But I want to know why they're thinking this way, why they're responding in this way, and
Okay.
what's their motive. And then maybe we can offer one or two words of advice along the way.
Okay.
And
Meg,
I must say children know what is right and wrong most of the time already. Yes.
No, I was just going to ask Meg. Meg, is your son listening to this? After this, he's going to demand more time with you. So you better clear your calendar and to spend time with your son.
You've been telling me, Mommy, that's why you never listen to me properly when I tell you something. So yeah. Okay. Amar, you said that very very well just now. You said it, what was it? It kind of poofed out of my brain. Listening to them, and although certain things that they say might frighten us, like for you, you're an expert. You deal with this every day. You've been doing this for 35 years. But for a parent, when a child says something that is kind of scary, and you automatically get very defensive, you want to correct them, you want to show them the right way and stuff like that. So how do we help our children by not being so defensive or not being so judgmental when it comes to what they're telling us, to listen with an open heart and an open mind?
That's difficult. Maybe I'll take a step back again and talk about Calvin Hobbes. I don't really read Calvin Hobbes. I find humor is phenomenal. I think it feeds us quite a bit. And I remember one particular Calvin Hobbes cartoon where he came to his father and says, "Who trained you to be a parent?" And then the father said, "Nobody," and then, "No wonder you've done a messed up job with me," kind of
Oh,
thing. And
no.
I think that is the problem. Most of us have parents, have almost no training. We follow the pattern of our father and our mother, and that may not be the best role models to have followed. I've had to unlearn a lot of the negativity of my parents. I want to keep their positivity, of course, the good things they gave me, but a lot of the negative parenting. So again, I've been trained by children. I don't think medical school trains you for this at all. And a lot of self-help books can put the dustbin because they give you a 10-point plan, which is meaningless. You're dealing with an individual in front of you, another human being who's so complex and diverse. And you can't say, "I understand you from my childhood," or stuff like that. They're so different from us. So I believe that as parents, we are on a journey to change. For children to change, parents must change first, and ongoingly, of course. And many parents bring their children to me expecting that I would fix their children, when actually I'm talking about how the parents should actually move forward, change who they are. So a lot of it is changing our home environment, making it more secure, making an environment which is an oasis of peace is what I like to use, the words I like to use. So a secure place where children can then voice their fears, their dreams, their darkness, their hopes, all there. Not an easy thing to do. So it's a learning curve. We're going to make mistakes. Don't worry about the mistakes. Learn from them and move forward. And Meg, I've lost the key question. Would you like to articulate it again? I'm old as well. Yeah.
Okay, my question was, how do we not be so defensive or not be judgmental when it comes to comments or whatever they're telling us that might scare us? Because I think as parents, we're also very guilty. Like, okay, I've been there, I've done that. It's wrong, and therefore, because I made a mistake, I don't want you to make my mistake, kind of thing.
Yes, I agree fully with you, Mac. We don't want to make mistakes, but how else did we learn? I sometimes when I give a talk, I start off by describing all my recent failures, because I find that I learn enormously from my failures. I seldom ever bother to remember my successes. They're very, very transient. I smell the rose, give it to God, and move on. Whereas my failures are the ones who actually I remember. Sometimes they haunt me. I have to work through them to see how I will not do that again. So if I failed a friend, then I learn very much about friendship and trust and the issue like that. So we can't remove all those hard knocks from our children. We sometimes need to stand by the side, almost with our hands in our mouth, frightened, yes, that's right, and be there for them. The biggest failure is not that our children make mistakes. The biggest failure is they grow up to be people that we don't like, that are not very pleasant individuals. I think that's a bigger worry for me. So maybe take a deep breath when the child says something that frightens you, and maybe have one or two stock phrases that you can say. Tell me a bit more about that, or what made you think like that or respond like that? I'd like to hear a bit more about that. So something like that to buy you some time, so you won't say, "Why you did that? That's horrible. Don't ever do that again." So we won't have that kind of rapid, quick response.
We all grew up with that, I guess. I wanted to just come back to a little bit about something you said earlier, and maybe, and you have been an advocate in terms of, and you've been speaking a lot about this lockdown, in terms of how we do this lockdown. Now, this morning I was just listening to something over breakfast, and the speaker was talking about different stages of lockdown, in order to control a pandemic, and he was referring to a 6-stage plan, different stages, and you have been an advocate, writing quite a bit. When we started the lockdown, this author says that we imposed all 6 at the same time. We went on a complete shutdown, including schools, and this is alluding to what you said. I mean, and studies seem to show that the infection of COVID among children it happens, but it's not as prevalent as among adults.
Yes.
I'm going to call out the elephant in the room. Do you think it was a wise thing to shut down schools? Looking at what's going through, and people thought that, parents thought that when they were working from home, at least children could go to school and come back. There's all this misconception about how do we manage this. What are your thoughts? I mean, you know, yeah,
Uh,
just,
uh, Father,
yeah,
Father Clarence, I'm still in a undecided, not fully committed state because I believe we're in a learning curve, and you to judge something that we did, many months ago is difficult. We've learned quite a lot. If I, for example, share some data with you from that I've just reading a few days ago, which just came out from the UK Education Department, and it shows that children are less susceptible, and children don't get infections very much outside, but when they come home, they seem to be more a spreader than
okay,
adults. So what does that mean for us? If we let children go to school, they pick up the bug, would that mean more infections for grandpa, grandma, mother, and father? So in fact, they showed in UK the teachers have 300 times the rate of COVID-19 infections than the average public. Obviously implying that children are in school are spreading it to their teachers. So it's a difficult judgment. In fact, that will be the judgment going to be made the next couple of days. I think as we look forward to whether we'll have another severe MCO or whether a milder MCO. So I don't envy the people who are trying to make decisions. Many of us do believe we like to get back to schools, but I've heard lots of stories from parents saying the SOP in school is a mess. There's nothing much. In some schools, they're very strict. In some schools, they are not. So if you could become like Japan, where, if you look at a Japanese school, their SOPs are phenomenal.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. You could almost eat in the toilet. That kind of quality of hygiene and level. In fact, the children come and cook their own meals and stuff like that. If we had that kind of discipline, I would say, yeah, let's keep schools open, and children will all wear masks up to probably down to the age of about 5. And we could do a lot of good with that. But right now, I think we're a mixed bag country. We've got some good and some mess, and I worry. But on the other hand, Father Clarence, I'm extremely worried about children trapped in abuse. I'm worried those who need their school meals because they're hungry. I'm worried about those who need their education because they come from very poor backgrounds, and this is their only lifeline to get somewhere and bring their family out of poverty. So in fact, I think one of the things we should get into place is a universal food program for every child in school as a means that COVID-19 should emphasize that should come back and be one of our things. So, Father Clarence, I do not know the real answer. I think with strict SOPs, I would like to get back to school. Without strict SOPs, I'm a little bit cautious. Maybe start with the older children, the teens who need for exams. I think that's the right way to go.
Can I just add, I think for schools, while there are some schools that emphasize on really strict SOPs, children are children at the end of the day. They when they meet their friends, they're overexcited. They want to touch each other, they want to be close to each other, and it's really difficult for them. Because when when that little window frame that the children went back to school, and I saw my son go back to school, kids were really excited to see each other, and there you have the teachers trying to tell them, hey, you know what, you have to be 1 meter apart, you have to have the mask on. Even having the mask on for like 6 hours in school, it's actually quite difficult for a child to do that. Can you imagine, sitting down in the classroom, having their mask on, trying to concentrate on the teacher, and they're very fidgety as well. So I think in a way it's also very difficult for them.
I believe that, Mac, one thing we should do is think of COVID bubbles. And I've suggested and written an SOP for school in our country saying that maybe keep that class together. That class mixes with nobody. They go for recess at their own time. They go for a PJ. They don't mix with other people. They walk along the path. They're dismissed at a different time. And that's 30, 40 people. I know that's a problem, but that is a safer thing than trying to let the whole school try and maintain an SOP and mix together.
Right.
That one, I think, is a failure. So
I wish my son could have a bubble too.
Yes, correct.
one of the big balls that you can sit inside and go, you can roll around, kind of thing. Maybe each one should.
And while we're on bubbles, I think that's what families should do as well right now to develop some friendships for children. Have a few people who are close to you and create a COVID family bubble where the 3 or 4 families meet and the children can sit down together, do schoolwork, chit chat. While the adults may actually go on and do their their office work, other things. That will give respite to everybody. And yet the children can actually study together. There may be different forms or standards, but that doesn't really matter. Having somebody study beside you encourages you to study, and that is a bubble that you trust. People who are reliable with their COVID-19 precautions, who don't take unnecessary risk.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Well,
Now, since
that is the
you
problem.
brought up COVID, though, I think we should answer a question that's on the
Sure.
comment section about COVID. This one comes from Anne Joseph. She says, "How do we handle the emotions that children go through when their
Mm.
parents are under quarantine at home or hospitalized due to COVID?" I think this is a question we never, this is something we never think about. But yeah,
Yep.
how do we handle them?
Mm. A lot depends also on the nature of that parent. Are they older? Have they got chronic illnesses? Are they high risk from dying? That is a major issue. I've noticed internationally quite a number of instances or reports where people have died without ever meeting their family. After admission, they've never met any of the family member and then died lonely there. So I think that's an additional issue as well. So there's going to be fears in the children when their parents are admitted. What I do with children when they are fearful is I'm honest with them. I don't think we should ever lie to children. We should tell them the truth. So we should tell them, yeah, this is COVID-19 is serious. If mom and dad is young, then I think we can be quite assuring. Yeah, most time this is quite mild and nothing much is going to happen. But if mom and dad have a serious illnesses or end up in ICU, then I think we should tell them, yeah, this is very worrying, and mom and dad may have a chance that they may not make it. In which case, I think we should really work with the health department to offer them an online intermittent link, perhaps daily or twice a day, where they can see their parent, perhaps in some form communicate, so that they have opportunity to be with them at this crucial time. Not easy, but whoever's with the children should not falsely reassure them. I dislike this thing that everybody people say, "Oh, don't worry, everything will be okay." I never say that to children. I think that's not a healthy thing to say.
I think we're all guilty about that. I think it's time that we change that phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
Uh, Very often we just always say, don't worry, everything will be okay. But the truth is, if things don't be okay, then how do you explain, especially to a child?
Yeah.
They trusted you and you said
Mm,
everything will be okay.
correct.
Yeah.
And that's the key, I think, in all the questions we've been talking about children is issue of trust, isn't it? The
Yes.
more the trust that they have in us, the more they're going to open up to us, the more they're going to believe what we say, the more they're going to be responsive to us, the more they're going to turn to us in their time of need instead of turn to their friends. I find many children are, what I call, selectively deaf. They can't hear their parents, but they can hear their peers because they trust their peers more than trust their parents in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Either that or, their parents could be like me and nagging all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got another question here by Christina Joseph. She said, at a recent family gathering, the adults sat down for a game of poker. We allowed our teenagers to join and taught them the game. Is this okay? A thought came to my mind. Are we introducing gambling? I guess it's family time, but what do you think as an expert?
I'm not an expert on gambling, but I remember my Chinese New Year's when I went out cycling with friends. In those days, we cycle, and we always ended up playing with cards, and we would bet. I think our kacang, or some food, or we would bet something ridiculous like you got to drink this whole bottle of water if you lose. I found it harmless fun. Never developed addiction with me. So I think if we play cards just for fun, that's fine. If we play cards for money, and people find that they want more of that, I think that's an addiction. Having said that, I believe all of us are addicts. We're addicted to something, and we
Yeah.
need to look at that addiction and wean ourselves off that addiction and become more wholesome. So some people are addicted to work, but they think that's a good addiction. No, that's also a bad addiction, just as much as any other addiction. So introducing cards to children, I think it's harmless if we do it for fun. I remember playing cards with my mum and enjoying it immensely, and with my friends during Chinese New Year. So I have no, regrets about that, but not for money, I would say.
Okay. So you can make them do chores instead.
Oh yes, that's right. That's a good idea.
Maybe I think you can start reintroducing board games. I mean, I grew up with board games, and you don't see many people. I mean, board games have moved on online now. I mean, you can play Monopoly online, you play Scrabble online, you play everything online. With you interact, but you interact with someone with a gadget again. So things have really changed.
Yeah, sometimes when children drop by the house and they're very painful things to talk about, we'll just take out a small jigsaw puzzle and just let's do this. And while we're doing the jigsaw puzzle, some conversation happens.
Yeah.
And something very meaningful gets spoken, and then we can explore that. So sometimes games which are physical, are useful to enable conversation to happen. We don't do enough of those. Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm not against a father having a PlayStation and he and his son playing and competing, on a PlayStation. That also may bond. I'm not against electronical, digital things as a means of bonding if used rightly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I guess, as long as you spend that quality time with your child,
Yeah.
why not? Right. We've got a question by Aaron Paul. He says, how do we reflect on Jesus into our lives, especially during this whole lockdown period?
Aaron, right? Aaron, if you look at my background there, I've got this huge cross in the background. I'm not sure it's visible right now. I've tilted the camera a bit. It's a 4-5, feet cross that I made myself for my
Wow.
wife and myself, so that in our living room, where many people meet us for spiritual direction and to talk about their pain in their lives, they see the focus of who we are, that is Jesus and the cross, which is the meaning of all our life. I think that's one thing I cannot surrender, the meaning of the cross and the impact of it, the forgiveness that has come into my life. So I believe that, many of us, we have a semblance of faith, but it hasn't gone deeper. I often use this word intimacy. Intimacy is not a word that's damaged so much as the other words. And we know what intimacy means. Imagine if you want to be intimate with your wife or your husband, and all you do is you spend a bit of quality time once a day with them, or you turn to them when you're in trouble. The rest of the time, you kind of ignore them. That's not a sign of intimacy, really. That's a sign of just using someone. And many of us in our relationship with Jesus, we tend to do that. We tend to turn to God when we are in distress, or we tend to give God a small portion of our time. What I've done with my life, my wife and I, what we've done, we've taken a step back very early in our life when we were struggling, burnt out as doctors, losing our direction. We took a step back and we spent a lot of time in silence with God. As the psalmist says, be still and know that I am God. We looked very hard at Jesus and we recognized that quite often he also ran away from everybody into a quiet place to be silent with the Father. So we spend a lot of time silent. So we tend to sleep early. We tend to wake up very early, about 4+, and then we tend to spend time in silence with God, where we don't think, with our mind. We don't feel with our emotions. We listen with our spirit, and our intention is to be attentive to God, to give God attentive listening and listen to what God is saying. And when we do that over time, slowly, we hear how much God loves us. And this permeates our entire being. And this, I think, is something that then overflows into the rest of our lives. So I like to say that that's what we should do during this lockdown. We have the opportunity right now to turn off our devices, to just be silent with God. It's not an easy thing to do initially. It requires some amount of some amount of perseverance. I've described it briefly inside the notes that I've given. I talked about how you need to actually be silent with God, and the impact of it. I cannot tell you how enormous the impact has been in my life. It enabled me to downsize my life. It's enabled me to stop chasing, meaningless things. It's enabled me to see what true success is. Too many of us chase false success. False success is what? Money, power, fame. That's meaningless. True success is what? Relationships. You know God deeply, you know yourself very well, and you know a few people as intimate soul spirit friends. So I like to say that COVID-19 inadvertently may give us a gift to take a step back and dwell in the presence of God, dwell in the embrace of Jesus, and there maybe discover ourselves as much as we discover God.
That's lovely. That's so brilliantly said. Now, of course, if you just joined us, we're talking about the impact of the lockdown on our children. Now, I'm just going to take a step back, to the beginning of the show when we started talking about how the whole thing impacted our children. Now, let's talk about mental health for our children. How important is it, for us as parents and as guardians to help maintain good mental health for our children? When do we start? Is it too late if they're already in the teenage years? So many questions. So maybe, Dr. Amar, you can actually help. Give us
and Mark, could you leave us 3 views? I need to see the others right now when I'm talking, and get a refresh of the question. This is a very deep and complex and multiple question. First of all, I like to say that it's never too late. I'm 60 plus, and I don't think it's too late for me to change many of the things that I still want to change in my life. Second thing I would say is that we are seeing, in tandem with the COVID pandemic, a mental health pandemic. We've always had mental health problems. The best data to look at is a National Health Mobility Survey done by the Ministry of Health. And you'll be surprised to see a lot of Form 1 students have suicide ideation, as much as 10%, which frightens me. So we've got an underlying significant mental health problem. Now with COVID, is exacerbated. And I believe if we don't deal with it concertedly as parents, as families, as societies, we're going to see a lot of long-term phobias in children, and upstick of suicide as a whole in children. And, long-term children are going to be, what shall I say, they're not going to live for the future, they're going to live for the moment, because this time has been so bad. Why live for future when, another horrible future may come? So better live for the moment. So those two things, I think we're having a mental health pandemic, and it's never too late to change. So the way to move forward is to become heartful. Now, the Buddhists have this lovely word called mindful, but it's not here that you're mindful. It's down here in your heart that you're mindful. So I prefer using the word heartful. We need to be heartful. We need to be present to the moment, present to ourselves, present to God, present to our children, present to the moment, in a sense. And in that moment, I think we can see more deeply what is happening. Our children also need to learn how to do this. What I was talking earlier about sitting in silence, I would recommend that we as a family do that. I've trained many families over the years in my workplace, whether they know Jesus or not, to sit down in silence together as a means of deeply listening to each other. Silence actually is the first language, actually. It's a deeper language than words. You can hear each other better. I had a 10-day silent retreat with 12 friends, and I never got to know them so well, except that we did not talk and was in silence together. So I recommend that, spend some time being together in silence, be heartful to each other, and be present to the small moments in our life, which are very, very moment. A small flower, a simple thing that somebody said that was very meaningful to explore. So Meg, I think it's not an easy answer, but it's being appreciative of each other rather than just trying to make the journey rather than not doing the journey itself. And I'm trying to get to the end point rather than not living the moment. I think too many of us are too rushed. Step back. At work, I always have time. I used to work 12 hours a day, but I always got time. I found that my primary job is to be listening to everybody. So people came and interrupted me constantly, and I was delighted because I was there for them. Then they can go and do the rest of the work, which is carrying all the children in the department. My job was to be the counselor, the listener, the person you can come and cry with, the safe person that you could talk with. And I think that's our role as family members. We need to be God with skin on, in a sense, to use an expression. We need to be God with skin on for people so that they can come, get a good hug, cry, know that things are safe, that, you can carry on despite having this failure. And we need to show them. So being filled with our own love is enormous, because you're going to be drained every day. Which is why every day I spend a lot of time being filled by God's love, so that I got some love to give away.
So you're talking, just to Meg's question about mental health. We are at this kind of a crossroad at this time, or there's a lot of talk about another MCO. We're not sure. There's a lot of speculation. And earlier you said you can throw away all the self-help books, the 10 points and all that. I'm going to ask you, if we do go into a similar kind of like lockdown, what are the 3 things that you will tell parents to do for their children? If we go into a kind of a strict lockdown, the top 3 things to pay attention to help children through this process.
Well, that's very tough. Dr. Clarence, 3 things. I've got so many things. Again, I would suggest read the article on resilience, where I've suggested 10 measures that we can take. Not a 10-point plan, but 10 changes in a life.
Okay, that's one. Read the article.
No. I don't think. I like to keep the 3. I think one of the things I like to say is maintain a discipline. Now, this word discipline is malaligned. We think of shouting or hitting somebody as discipline, but discipline actually, to me, is a framework, a trellis, a way to blossom your life. So create a framework at home. Fix your sleeping times, Fix your screen time so they're limited. Fix your meal times. Create a framework around which that you can blossom as a family. So these things are things that you keep, so that it's something that creates a routine from you. Routine develops and helps security. The second thing I would say is actually spend time, as I mentioned earlier, in silence as a family. Sit down and if you cannot and you're struggling because you're restless, then maybe close your eyes and just breathe. Concentrate on your breathing. Breathe God in and breathe out your fears and your insecurity and your restlessness. And the third thing is spend time together doing things which are not screen based. It could be cooking, it could be a board game, as Father Clarence mentioned. It could be working in the gardens, going for a walk in the neighborhood. Even if there's a strict MCO, you could still sit in your garden and look at things, explore your garden, and so on. So I think perhaps these three things as the top of my head is.
Yeah, just think to create a kind of a routine, a discipline of routine. I think that's a very thing. Time with one another, and do things together. And I think, in the midst of all this, we need. I think that's a nice takeaway. Look into. And I just recall that during the strict MCO, I think one of the things I did was the routine. I still came into my office, even though my room and my office is just about 25 steps away. The temptation is to stay in the room. But, I kind of got up at the same time, did regular things in the morning, and still came into office. And I think that helped me a lot, actually. That really helped. Yeah, and I think it's something that parents can take away, things that they could do that you will not find in a self-help book. This is Dr. Amar's personal experience.
No, and again, remember, each child is very different. What works for one child may not work for another child in the same family. We are different people. Learn the language of our children. Learn the language of their loves. Learn how they receive love and how they give love. And we have to give love in the way they receive love. We have to do them for them in the way they need it, not the way we want to do it.
Yeah, I think that's where we make the mistake first, isn't it? We always want to do the things our way because we're the parents, we're the guardians, not your way. So I think it's about time we slow down a little bit and just, change our ways little by little. Like you said, it's never too late. So if you think it's too late, no, you're not. You can still help. Now, Dr. Amar, I think you've mentioned many times throughout the whole show that children listen and they listen very well and they listen with their hearts. But I think for a lot of parents, they think, no, my child doesn't listen. Whenever I tell him to do this, he doesn't do it, and stuff like that. But the truth is, I think when it comes to parents, we forget that whatever we tell our child, they might not listen, but they're watching us. So how we respond to a certain thing is what they're going to do in the future as well. They're going to mirror us. So how do we make that change? How do we help ourselves so that we can help them? Because I think you brought this up too earlier.
Yeah, children in a sense are wet cement in a sense. We're writing in their lives. We're writing with our lives into their lives is what you're saying right now. And I know I had a problem with my father. He was not the kindest of men when he had some alcohol. And then he became abusive. And then he would throw his temper. And I found that when I got married, I also started throwing my temper. And then I recognized, hey, I'm just like my father in the way I respond to my wife when I'm angry. And that's something I imbibed unconsciously without even thinking about it. I had to unlearn all of that, And so we don't recognize unconsciously how much we pick up from our parents and our siblings as well, for that matter. So have a good look at ourselves, perhaps. Maybe look at ourselves from our children's perspective. If we don't want our children to shout, then maybe don't shout. If we want our children to listen, maybe we don't nag anymore. Maybe we speak softly or we speak less, and we listen as much. If we want them to admit they fail, maybe we should be prepared to admit that we fail as well. I'm sorry, I made that mistake. I was wrong. You were right. I don't think very many parents are prepared to say that to their children, but that's a very powerful thing to say to your children, because then they learn that everybody can be failed. So I think walk the talk is what we are saying here right now in our lives. Extremely difficult to do. I believe that if both husband and wife are together in this, then it makes a lot of sense. They can support each other, and they can actually help each other move forward. But quite often one spouse is carrying the burden of the parenting, and the other one actually has neglected it, which makes it difficult. Ultimately, I want myself to change. If I want children to change, I want Jesus to give me all the fruits of the Spirit. And that is something that I can then give my child. Having said that, not every child is going to change.
Yeah.
And there are going to be occasional children who I've told parents, this is nothing that you have done bad. This is just a particular personality who's warped from childhood and will have to look for help. And then I want to say, in that case, look for professional help. And Father Clarence, even your idea of mental health, there are children who are struggling severely, look for professional help. Have a support system where people can come in and give you the support you may need.
Brilliant. Okay. So when you say support system, how can we as a community help, families with, families trying to weather through this storm? Because every family is different. And like you said, every child is different too. Some families may find it more difficult. Some families might find it easier, but how as a community can we come together and support them?
So there are different levels of support. One of the major levels of support my wife and I have been trying to do this last year is give away financially as much as we can and target the people who are struggling. And so I think as a community, let's think also about that. Don't wait for the government to do all of that. We can target families who are struggling financially and, work as a community to make sure that they don't have to worry for the next 1 year about finance. But on an emotional need in terms of tantrums and struggling with our children, it's always good to have a group of parents that you can relate with. This may have to be online, could be a WhatsApp chat, or could be a group that meets on Google Meet or something else, and there discuss how best. Recognize that parents are also experts. All of us have our failures, and those educate us, and we can share that in knowing how to support our children. Sometimes that doesn't really work, and what you need is one confidant, one other mother or father that you can actually pour out your heart with. And their job is a lot to listen to you, but also perhaps clarify for you what you need to do in the future. So I think both the physical support as well as the time that we make for each other to listen and not too quickly give glib answers, but listen and offer experiences from our own failures.
That's brilliant. Okay, we are about to end the conversation, end the topic this morning. I want to thank everyone who's actually posted lots of questions. I think one summarized question that I can take from every person on our comment section is about screen time. So we're going to go back to that screen time and ask you a final question from our comment section, Dr. Amar. Parents want to know, parents actually spend a lot of time on their screens as well. And this kind of influence their children too, So, how do we help that? And do you have any tips? Because some parents don't even have the time to take away from their very busy schedule and babysit their own children during that time, and we don't have a choice. We give them our screens. So do you have any suggestions that we can
not easy, and I fully agree with you, Mag, that this is a crisis, not just in Malaysia, but much of the world. A couple of years ago, I spent some time in Sikkim with my wife, and the children had no screens at all, zero. Oh, the children are phenomenal. They talk to us, they laugh a lot, they played a lot. Oh, I wish our children could go for elective to that poor country and learn. So there are times we need to use our screen as adults. There are times we do not need to. We don't need to read all of COVID-19. Maybe one day we look at an update, that's it, okay? We don't need to look at every WhatsApp message or Telegram message or whatever. So we use our screens for our work. After that, perhaps cut it off. We don't need to watch every television program or Netflix movie or stuff like that. So maybe limit your screen time. Have a discipline for yourself about your screen time as an adult. So then the rest of the time you're free, okay, with your children. The second thing I'll suggest is try and create initiatives or mechanisms where your children can do things which don't require you while you're working with your screen. So think of activities that they could do. And again, I want to suggest one of these things that we can do is cooperate with other parents and create a COVID bubble. So then the children can be together and the parents could be doing their thing. They could be in the same house that's being used, all the parents and children are there together in the same house, but children could be doing a different activity. But in your own house, you could dream up things. You could get children to do some painting, some writing for you, some things that are meaningful and entertaining. And of course, you got to pay attention when they finish to that. Most of us recommend that we work in spurts at home. You work for 20 minutes, 30 minutes for smaller children, and then take a break, 5 minutes, 10 minutes with them, and then go back. For older children, you can probably work for an hour and then maybe give them 20 minutes where you spend some time with them. So I think we have to learn how to re-engineer our lives. In the one of the documents that I put there on resilience, at the last page, I've given guidelines for working at home, some suggestions from for parents to work at home. But again, having a support system with other parents, I think, is a brilliant idea, and we have not leaned enough on this. This means that we don't crisscross around town. There's going to be somebody nearby, okay? We can't travel 20K and then network with a parent there, and maybe time to redevelop friendships with neighborhood groups or with our church parish in a local area. Yes.
It's like going back in time where, when we were growing up and everybody would come out from the same taman and play together.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Father Clarence, do you have any more questions for Dr. Amar?
No, Meg. I think it's an eye opener for a lot of us, even for myself, just listening to you this morning. Because we struggle too. I mean, in church. I mean, for example, even our Sunday school. I mean, used to be and everywhere children interact. Even that we are not able to, and we do not know when we are able to back people to church. So finding new ways of helping children. I like the idea of creating a bubble. A family bubble, with neighborhood bubble that can still help with children, and I guess helps adults too. I mean, I sometimes like, looking for somebody to have coffee with sometimes, so I have created this little Zoom group that we have coffee with. Yeah. So, sometimes it's quite nice to find new ways, and I think that's what we all need to find new creative ways, and because my fear is that if we do go into another lockdown, a lot of spirits will be dashed. People kind of like but I think what we hope is that people will find new ways in this new year, and I think you have given us some nice suggestions. Thank you very much, Amar, for the conversation this morning.
I enjoyed it very much, Meg and Brother Clarence. Thank you.
Amar, you actually enlightened us a lot throughout this past hour and 18 minutes. Before we let you go, any last words or any last advice that you'd like to share with all our viewers this morning? Maybe just give us a head start as to how we can build resilience in our families, especially with all the talk about, going into MCO 2.0. How do we begin?
Don't live on a pause button. Don't live waiting for COVID to finish. Transform now, change, grow. Use COVID as a sandpaper to, remove all the rubbish or the meaningless things that we had in our lives, and clarify what are the most meaningful things, which are relationships. And then, secondly, don't allow COVID to describe us. We are the children of God. We are the beloved. I love this word. We are the well-loved, the much-loved of God. We are the beloved of God. And it's time now to grow into the reality of that, not in our mind, but in the reality. Not by going to a physical church per se, but by experiencing the deep intimacy of God and knowing our belovedness. So I think these are the inadvertent gifts of COVID. I hate COVID, but I recognize that this can also be used to transform us. So don't wait. Use this opportunity to move forward. Don't despair. God is with us and will see us through this.
Absolutely. Brilliantly said. Thank you so much, Amar, for joining us this morning. We truly appreciate everything that you've shared with us, especially as parents. Wow, there's so much we need to do and so much we need to work on as well. So we're going to wish you a pleasant weekend ahead. Thank you once again for joining us on Catholics at Home, and continue doing the great work that you do for all the children everywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day. So there you go. Dato Dr Amar-Singh HSS. He's been working with children for 35 years. That's a lot of years to be working on children. And, he's actually given us pearls of wisdom that we can use as parents. And I think, Father Clarence, you've learned a lot too, isn't it, from him?
Yeah, I had a lot of questions, and this morning I think this conversation has helped clarify. Because when parents ask us, sometimes I feel very incomplete to be able to answer many of these questions. And I think, it's given us much food for thought too, as to what we can do. It's like you said, if we do go to MCO 2.0, maybe this time we are more prepared, we're a bit more resilient as to what we can do.
Definitely. All right. So we are at the end of the show, but just before we leave, we would like to remind you, don't forget to like and share this video, and also share it around so that more people can learn a little bit about, the impacts of the whole lockdown on our children. And I think we've answered quite interesting questions throughout the show as well. So let's help each other in our community too. Also, I think, Father, we would like to talk about your podcast that you're working on this year.
Yeah, so I'm also trying to reinvent ministry, reframing my thoughts as to how to reach out to people. This is one. Catholics at Home has been one aspect. Yeah, so I've kind of tried to reinvent myself a little bit. Started off with a little podcast, an audio podcast of Sunday Gospel Reflections, which is available on Spotify. And I've been writing for about 10 years. I call my blog Preaching and You Were Sleeping. I guess that's what most people do when you're in church, when the priest is preaching. Guilty as charged, Max. Don't worry. So I call that Preaching and You Were Sleeping. So it's an audio podcast. You could go to Spotify and look for it. It's also available on Google Podcasts. And I think it's coming up also on Apple Podcasts soon. It's waiting for the approvals to come through. So I'm also trying to find things to do and trying to reach out to people and to keep that ministry going to the Word of God, to be able to reach out to people. So So this is my plan for the year.
Is it already available, or will it be available?
Yes, it's already available on Spotify. I just started with the first Sunday, last Sunday. So tomorrow you can look out for another one on the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord. So I'm trying to persevere and do this every Sunday for people to listen and some thoughts for the week. What you can do for the week, just to help people. Yeah. So little things to, people have been nudging. Yeah. I'm thankful to many people who've actually pushed me in this direction and to keep this going. Yeah. So I'm grateful to them too.
That's brilliant. Congratulations on the podcast. Woo!
And Mag, you also collaborate a little bit. People will begin to hear that too.
Just a little bit.
So do look out for do go to Spotify and check that out. And if you have suggestions on how I can improve it, I'm quite new to I'm quite used to blogging as in
writing things down,
typing. If you have some suggestions that you could offer to help me, do let me know. You could send us a comment.
All right. And speaking about suggestions, sorry, Father, we lost you a little bit.
Thanks for giving me this little ad time.
Now, also speaking about suggestions, we are welcoming your suggestions as to what topics we should speak about on Catholics at Home podcast as well. Just send us a PM and we will consider your suggestions too. Also on Facebook, we've created a page. It's called Willing Hearts. We'd like you to join us on Willing Hearts, where we support the businesses in our community. And I think 2020 was a challenging year, and a lot of people had to look for substitutes in terms of income. So they've started cooking or they started selling other things. So if you have done that as well, please join us on Willing Hearts on Facebook. Go check it out. And we're also looking for groups to join us on Jamming for Jesus. Okay, so if you have a parish group that you'd like to be part of Jamming for Jesus on Fridays as well, please, you're more than welcome to join us. Just send us a PM and we'll get back to you. All right. So I think we've covered everything that we've needed to announce on a little bulletin board. Father, anything else you'd like to add before we end the show?
Yeah. As always, we end with a prayer, and we are to bless us and the work that we do. And today, let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, our loving Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this morning, for this opportunity to have this conversation, especially of the impact of the lockdown on children. Help us to be aware of their needs. Help us to have a listening heart, to be able to listen to them, to be able to feel them, and to be able to respond to them. Lord, bless us as we continue this struggle through this pandemic. watch over us, bless us, and lead us so that all that we do may be for your greater glory. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Son and Holy Spirit.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us on the Catholics at Home podcast. First episode for 2021. We've got loads of great topics coming your way every Saturday morning. Of course, don't forget to like, follow, and share our social media pages so that you can get updates whenever we post them online as well. In the meantime, we're going to wish you a fantastic weekend ahead. Father, you have a great weekend too. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Meg. See you soon.
Bye. Have a good one, guys.